The world has changed and it's not slowing down. With 60 years of wisdom, business savvy, and life experience, I've learned how to face change head on with resilience and persistence. And as a committed and very successful coach, I've helped hundreds break through what's holding them back and build the mindset that drives success. I'm Terry Yoffe, and if you're ready to create change, it starts with changing yourself. Let's start a conversation. Every podcast episode will challenge your limiting stories, push you to take bold steps, and inspire you to live the extraordinary life you were meant to have.
Dare to look at someone older and learn from somebody older.
Meet Melinda Blau, an 81-year-old, bold and successful, award-winning journalist who is doing life on her terms and proving that aging is not a limitation, but a gift. She shares with us what makes her happy and fulfilled is knowing that the words and advice she offers in her many books on relationships and social trends have helped readers gain insight into their own lives and thereby allowing them to make better choices. Hi all, and welcome to Melinda Blau. Melinda is an award-winning, best-selling author. She has written 16 books, and her latest is The Wisdom Whisperer. We're going to get into all of that and more as Melinda takes us through life lessons, living, and making the most of every moment. Welcome, Melinda.
Thanks so much for having me, Terry.
It's such an honor, such a pleasure, really, to have an older person come here and really dive in to the whole idea of ageism. Because today, you can be any age and create whatever you want. Melinda is definitely an example of that. I also am an older person and have also created a lot of different things. So let's pull back the curtain a little bit, Melinda, and talk about what actually got you to this particular place. Challenges, struggles.
Right. Well, I have to always start my interest, my abiding interest as a journalist and a writer has always been relationships. And that started when I was a kid because I grew up with a brother who was 9 years older and a sister who was 11 years older. So I always say I grew up in a household of adults. And so I was this little tiny girl wondering what it was all about. And we lived in a big house with a big stairway. And after they put me to bed, I would sneak out of my room and I would sit at the top of the stairs and I would listen as my parents got into arguments usually with my sister and brother who were then teenagers. And I would listen and try to figure out dynamics and alliances. And it really made me interested in relationships early on. I couldn't have articulated it that way as a 6-year-old, but that's how I felt. My sister went to college when I was 6. So, I mean, it was a very, very big age difference. And when you're 6 and your brother is 13, he's like 100 years older. And then when I went to college, my roommates will tell me that I never slept, that I was always going from room to room, asking people their stories. I was always interested in their family life and what they were like with their siblings. And I went to Syracuse University and I can remember driving with a friend one day and I said, you know what? I would just like to go knock on somebody's door and talk to them. And ironically, I wasn't even thinking. I majored in education. So I wasn't thinking of becoming a writer or a journalist, although I always loved writing. And, you know, I grew up, I was born in 43, so I was a girl of the 50s.
Right.
And got married in the 60s. And when I got married, I lived a very traditional life. I married the good provider. We had two beautiful kids. And then 13, 14 years later, I was divorced, like many people of my generation. And, one of the things that I've learned, the biggest lesson in life, is you just never know where it's going to take you. Whether you're in a good place or a bad place, the only thing you can count on is change. The biggest challenge, I think, of anybody's life is to deal with change. So probably my first big trauma was my divorce. That was difficult. But, each hurdle that you get over is one you're better at jumping the next one because you've had that experience. And I'm now 81. I will say it out loud, and I'm proud of that. I turned 81. I live in Paris and New York, and I turned 80 in Paris last year. And my daughter flew over and surprised me. And I swear I ran through the streets of Paris practically saying, I'm 80, I'm 80, I'm 80. It's been a very liberating thing. And part of what has really helped me say I'm 81 and proud of it and call myself an old lady is because I started collecting these women when I was 46 who were anywhere from 32 to 20 years older than me. And eventually I started calling them my old ladies and meaning that in a very, very complimentary way, because I looked at each of them, and there's 9 in the book, and I said, I actually wanted to call the book I'll Have What She's Having, because I looked at them in their 90s and hundreds, most of them, and I went, I want to be like that when I grow old. And they were all very, very different. But the unifying sort of qualities of all of them were that they were very socially engaged, which I am also. They let nothing stop them. I mean, they had losses. They lost husbands, sometimes 2 husbands. They had serious illness like cancer and heart disease. Some walked with walkers, bent over, but they kept going. And that was the thing that I admired, that no matter what. And I can remember 2 of them lived in my building. One has since passed, but there's another one still lives in my building in New York. But the one who passed died at 104 and a quarter. And I can remember she was in her early hundreds and she dropped something on the floor. And I said, oh, let me get it for you. She went, no, I'll get it myself. It's good for me to bend down. So whenever I find something hard to do physically, I think of my old ladies and I think it's good for you. Bend, reach, keep moving. And, of all the challenges in my life, I think aging is probably the biggest one. But I am prepared for it because of my old ladies, because I watched them push through everything. Sometimes they had hospital visits, and scares and all the things that you worry about when you age. It happened to them, but they got through it. I always say they lived until they died, and that's what I hope to do. So I'm not sure if that told you where I came from. Professionally, I started writing when I was a kid, but when I graduated college, instead of becoming a teacher, I went into first educational publishing and then segued into journalism. And I've met some wonderful people along the way, and I've pushed through the tough times. That's what you have to do. And I've had great success as a writer. I've had a book on the bestseller list of the New York Times, and that's a wonderful feeling. But you have to keep living. All of those things. One of the things when we're young, we think, if I just get this job, if I have a book on the bestseller list, everything's going to be fine. But that's not true. You will just have a book on the bestseller list, and then life goes on. And so you need to keep, making new goals and reaching for new things. And that's what I saw in my old ladies. Even if they got satisfied by making themselves a dinner, they felt good about themselves. And that's what it comes down to. It's not the awards. It's what's in here, in your head and your heart.
So well put. It's so beautiful. Being in my 80s as well, hard to admit, but you know what? We have so much wisdom. We bring so much wisdom, so much knowledge to the table in life. And as a coach, one of the areas I do coach on is ageism, because people have, again, fears. What's it going to be like to get old? So they spend time wasting time thinking about what's it going to be like? What am I going to do?
Right.
And all of that, when they could be fueling their mind and their life with
Right.
positivity.
Right.
Today, and I wanted to ask, there's so much talk around ageism doesn't matter anymore.
That's not true.
Thank you. Talk about that, please.
Well, ageism is alive and well in the world because people will. I mean, I wrote recently about an incident with my grandson, and this is a perfect example of ageism. You know, in a high school today, you would never catch people using, well, I won't use high school because those are young kids, but people will say things to old people as if they're invisible. So I was with my youngest grandson. We had attended my oldest grandson's high school graduation. So this was 4 or 5 years ago. And the youngest one and I were getting bored because we didn't know it was in the high school football field, whatever. And my daughter and son-in-law and the older kids were saying hello to everybody because they went to school with them. And I didn't know any of those people. And my grandson was getting bored. So he said, can we go back to the car? So I said, sure. And we got the keys. We go back to the car, and it was a very hot June day. And so we left both the doors open, and I'm sitting in the driver's seat. He's sitting behind me in the passenger seat, but in the back, and both the doors are open. Suddenly, this is in New Jersey, and I'm going to say this. I hope I don't insult anybody. But this kind of Yahoo from New Jersey comes up, and a very loud voice says, I'm trying to get in the car if this old bag will close the door. Instead of saying, like, forget that I'm old. And I wasn't as old then. I was in my 70s then. I think I was 75. And I wanted to really, let him have it. But my grandson was sitting behind me. And also, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know what he'll do. So I have no defenses against that. And so I just closed my door. And instead, I used it as a teaching moment with my grandson and said, can you believe? Well, we still joke about it. He's now 16. He was like 11 when this happened. And we still joke about it. And he'll sometimes say, he calls me Minna. That's my grandma name, which is another example of ageism. Or grandma's name.
What does he call you?
My grandma name is Minna.
Minna, okay.
And the joke is every old Jewish woman in Florida is named Minna. But it wasn't grandma. And when I had my first I was a little younger than 60, and I didn't want to be called grandma because that sounded old. That's internalized ageism. But I didn't even realize it at the time. It took me many years to understand ageism. Only when I started being the victim of it myself did I realize the grandma name was internalized ageism. The incident in the parking lot was blatant ageism, where somebody really doesn't care if he insults me. He didn't know me from Adam. And I wasn't doing anything to him. It was a hot day. My door was open. He could have just as easily said, do you mind closing your door? My wife and I want to get in. But he didn't. So once I started becoming aware of it myself, and I've never really been much of an activist in my life. I've done some things, to help people out and things like that, but I've never been a marcher or a flag bearer or whatever. Not even in the women's movement. I have not. I have a female partner, but I've never felt part of that. The queer movement, which was another word that they co-opted. And in a way, when I took old lady, I felt like it was older people could say old lady, just like a gay person can say queer, which used to be a really horrible insult. And now it's not. What I started realizing once it became my issue as well, whereas, for example, I was on a TV show. And after the TV show was over, the producer called me aside. I was in my early 60s. And the producer called me aside and she said, "Oh, God, you were great." They gave me 10 minutes, which is a long time. It was a morning show. And I was talking about disappointment. And you were great. But next time, wear a scarf. And just like your mouth dropped, I was speechless. And I'm no shrinking violet. And so I looked at her and I said, "You're no spring chicken either." And you know what her answer was? She said, "No, I'm not. But I'm not in front of the camera. I'm behind the camera." But I never forgot that. And by the way, I recently found a picture of myself then. I looked pretty damn good. I was only 60. But it really made me aware of how dangerous that thinking is, because once you start thinking, "Oh my God, I'm getting old. What am I going to do?" And we do it to ourselves, right. And a couple of years later, and I write about this in the book, I'd gotten out of the shower, and I don't spend a lot of time looking at myself in the mirror, but I glanced at my body in the mirror for a second. And I was appalled. I said, "Oh my God, when did that happen?" I was 68. But luckily, in that same moment, I thought, this is a really slippery slope. If you start hating what your body looks like, you're 68, it's not going to get any better. It's not going to go up. It's all going to keep falling.
Gravity.
Yeah, exactly. And so instead of saying, "Oh my God, what alien snuck in the middle of the night and put this body on my head?" I said, not bad for 68. And it was a really pivotal moment for me because I said to myself, you've got to accept who you are at every moment of your life. So whether it was my divorced self that I had to accept, my bisexual self that I had to accept, now I have to accept my old self and all that comes with it. And I have my moments. Believe me, I have my moments worrying about health. I'm normal, but I try to bring myself back to the now and say, look, you're here now. You're still writing. Your mind is still good. That's all that matters. And then I also have to do as much for myself, just to keep walking, keep moving my body, keep stretching, and accepting all the changes that happen. And that's not always easy. It's not always easy, but it's necessary. When they say consider the alternative, I don't think about death, because death, I don't know if there's life after death. It's going to happen someday. But what's worse is suffering. And she was not my old lady, but she was the 98-year-old mother of a friend of mine. And I never forgot this story, and I always think of it. She was a woman who was a golfer all her life, very physically active. And then she fell and she ended up in a wheelchair. And one of her friends, a younger friend, I think she was 96 at the time, said, "How can you be happy anymore? You're in a wheelchair." And she looked up at her friend and she said, "You make your own happiness." And that is so true. So that I saw that with each of my old ladies, no matter what happened to them, they found reasons to be grateful, happy. Nobody's happy every minute, content, and they kept pushing on. So to me, that's the biggest lesson that I've learned from my old ladies and also from myself. At this point, I had a friend who said to me, my friends hated that I called them my old ladies, by the way. And One of them challenged me and said, well, do you think of yourself as an old lady? And I said, absolutely, proud of it. And one of the nice things, Terry, since the book came out, many people are saying to me, you're my old lady. And I didn't anticipate how good that would feel, because basically what they're saying is, one guy said it to me, the first one that he said, you give me hope about aging. And that's a wonderful, to be somebody's, they want what I have. And even though everybody is going to age differently, none of us know what's going to happen. Tomorrow I can walk out into the street and get hit by a car. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen to our loved ones. We don't know what's going to happen to us. So we just keep trucking, keep moving along.
Such words of wisdom. Melinda's book is Wisdom Whisperers. And she interviews and talks to these old ladies about their life, about where they've come. They're 99, 100, 104 and 3/4.
Right.
And I think for me, always shuddered at being older. And when I finally, through a coach that I had, said, your superpower is your age. I said, oh, okay. So I love when I go out there and I talk to people and I talk about age, and people say, you're such an inspiration, because when I meet people, they think I'm 55, 60, but when I tell them, hey, I'm 82, their mouth drops open. Not about how I look, but how I be in life, how I show up, that
how you live.
Right. It's exactly. I just finished speaker school to get back on a stage. There's no stopping me. Somebody said, are you going to retire? I said, no. Why would I do that? Well, you've had such a great career. You've done so much. I said, I'm just getting started. It's about paying it forward.
That's exactly right.
Melinda has more to share, but first, a quick word from Try Coaching. Are you a clinger? Someone that holds on to the same job, same friends, same routine because it is comfortable and wonders why the changes you long for never happen. Spoiler alert, change never happens when you cling to your comfort zone and never venture out. What if things could change by taking one small step outside your comfort zone? What would you do to make that happen? If this vision has you saying yes, reach out and let's start a conversation. I can help you achieve the goals that you long for. Now, back to the podcast.
And it's interesting because all of my old ladies were of the GI generation. It was not the generation that had therapy and wondered what, not like the baby boomers. And even we're on the cusp of what was called the silent generation. But I always identified more with baby boomers than with the old, because my siblings were the silent generation. And they felt so much older than I. So my old ladies were of the you put one foot in front of another. That was the generation that saved tinfoil in the war. And they didn't try to figure out life the way baby boomers did. I mean, I remember one of the funniest times, my very first old lady was a woman named Henrietta. She was 32 years older than me, and I met her in a writing class. And then I moved out of New York and I moved up to Massachusetts. And so we became pen pals. And I would send her the articles I was writing in New York Magazine or in the women's magazines. And she wrote back to me one time. She says, your generation amazes me. You're so into therapy and figuring things out. She said, in my day, the only person I knew who sought the help of a psychiatrist who was a woman who ran naked down the street one night. And she meant it. And then if I thought back to some of my older relatives, that made sense. They didn't think about, oh, I have such a terrible relationship with my father or my mother, or there was none of that. And so I always tell people when they look for, and that's the purpose of my book, is to say, this is an amazingly counterintuitive approach to battling ageism. Befriend someone much older, because then, there's a lot of this, you talk about the Arab-Israeli conflict, or there's a lot of intergenerational programs now. And it's the idea that if you get to know the other, you're not so afraid of them anymore. And that's exactly what happened to me. People are afraid to look at old people because they don't want to be that. They don't want to think of themselves possibly moving more slowly. Or, the thing that worries me is losing the mind. That to me is all bets are off. But even the kinds of things that having to, a little more difficulty getting up out of a chair. So people avert their eyes when they see somebody. They don't want wrinkles. Sometimes it's just the cosmetic thing. And we need to look, because if you're lucky, you will age. You may not age well, or what you feel is well, but aging is a gift, because you get to see what's happening. It really is a gift. And all of my old ladies knew that. And they all knew that their time, when you're 90 or 100, there's an expiration date, and we don't know when it is. But even at our age, we know there's an expiration date. And so it was such a wonderful thing. And I tell people, don't avert your eyes. Look at old people, learn from them, see how they deal with the fact that they may not have the status they once had because they're retired now. Like my brother is 90 now, and he is in an assisted living place. And he introduced me to a man. He said he used to be president of Seagram's. He's not anymore, So where do you get status from? Do you get it, or do you not care about it? And those are all the things that are important to think about. Everybody has a different answer to it. So one of my friends, Marge, when she retired, she was lucky. She had resources. She started a program in one of the hospitals, first as an ombudsman. She volunteered, and she would help patients. And she said it amazed her how people didn't want to know. They didn't want to know what the surgery was. Just do it to me and get it over with. And she said, no, you need to ask questions. So she did that when she was 68. By the time she was in her 80s, she didn't want to go to the hospital every day. And she started a program for, this is a hard word to say, prosthetic devices. And I said, why? Why that? And she said, because there was a need. I knew people, soldiers were losing, people from cancer were getting amputations and whatever. And so she started this program, and it gave her purpose. And I talk about in the book how important it is, no matter what the purpose is, to feel that you still have a reason to be here. And it could be something as simple as, I love to iron, and I can still iron. I heard a 96-year-old woman say that recently. She was proud of herself. She enjoyed doing it. For other people, for me, I love to cook, and I love to create new foods. I can do that till the day I die, hopefully, as long as I can stand or sit. And again, if I have a brain. So, you try to find things that feed you.
Exactly. So there was a sentence that you talked about, I couldn't find it, about having connections. And if you have, and I'm going to missay it probably, relationships or connections, then you've had a good life.
No, what it is, you're close. It's, if you're good at relationships, you're good at life. And the reason for that is that relationships are absolutely everything. I mean, they're now in all the studies that they're doing with old people, the people who do the best are those who have relationships and know how to keep making them. Because as Zelda, who died at almost 105, used to say, honey, you have to replenish. She said, everybody I know is dead. And she said, and she picked me up at the tennis court because she said, you look like an interesting woman. And she absolutely charmed the pants off me. And I just was blown away by her. And so we became friends, but she initiated it. And she told me this story that her kids were worried. She was 103 or 104 at this point, 102. And she would take morning walks for 3 miles along the ocean in Florida. And her family was worried. Mom, what happens if something happens to you on the walk? You're alone. There may be nobody nearby. So she's walking on that path one day. And the way she tells the story, she says, and I see this young woman. And I walk up next to her and I go, hi, I'm Zelda. I'm 101. And my kids are worried about me because I walk this path every morning alone. Would you mind if I walk with you? The woman, again, just like I was totally charmed by it. They became friends and they walked every day. And that's what you have to do. And I know for me, that is one of the great pleasures of my life that I luckily I have a dog, so it makes it easier. I have a very cute dog. And so people will stop me or they'll compliment the dog. And if they have a dog, I have a conversation. If they have a child, and I'm very good at and it only works if you're genuinely interested. It doesn't work if you're just like, let me see if this works. But so, for example, I could be at a street corner with somebody and I look down at, let's say it's a woman and she's wearing very great looking sneakers. And I'll say, I love your sneakers. Where'd you get them? And it starts a conversation. But it only starts a conversation because I really love her sneakers. Because people can tell if you're being genuine or not. They really know the difference. And now all the studies on aging are saying that the secret weapon is socialization. So if you're good at relationships, you're good at life your whole life.
Just from listening to the conversation, we could go on, but that's not going to happen. Unfortunately, this is just blowing me away.
Well, that's good.
Really. I mean, the truth is, we're never too late, never too old to be engaged, to find a purpose that keeps us going and moving and keeps us sharp. I go to networking events. I do Zooms. I do a podcast. I go to an event. I'm clearly the oldest person in the room. Clearly, everywhere I go. Oh, look at me. I'm the oldest person in the room. I don't know if it's a badge of courage or.
Well, it is.
In a way. And, I think it's also a mindset because I think there's societal norms that play into this. In your 20s, you get married, you have 2.5 kids, you work, you retire at 65, and then you go off into the sunset because nobody wants to hear you, see you. You become irrelevant. I think people think that way. You're not seen, you're not heard, and we're going to go longer, and that's okay. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I have some hopeful thoughts because I have, since the book came out, I've been tapping into a kind of universe of 60-year-olds who are already getting it. And this is a wonderful thing because some of them are being retired even in their 50s. And so a lot of 50 and 60-year-olds are starting to become aware of ageism. I didn't become aware of it till it hit me in the face. And I think it's trickling down to lower ages. I see 30 and 40-year-olds worrying about getting older too.
Right.
But the hopeful thing is that a lot of people are fighting back and on different fronts. Some of them are like, if any of your listeners don't understand ageism, they should read Ashton Applewhite's book, This Chair Rocks. It's excellent. And if you don't want to read the book, she has a TED Talk, Ashton Applewhite, and she's very good. It was one of the first books on ageism. So there's the anti-ageism activists. That's a mouthful. But then there's the pro-aging people, which I consider myself pro-aging. And I like that term because you're saying it's not tied to a particular age. It's not like, oh, you have to be this over 60. Just be pro-age. Aging is a gift. That's the thing. You keep it in your mind. Aging is a gift, and I want to do it for as long as I can. To me, I see a lot of hopeful signs. I see it on LinkedIn. There's a lot of, you see it on a lot of great old people on Instagram now. Not so crazy about TikTok, but that's my personal bias, because I think some of the grandmas are laughed at in TikTok. Like I don't like drunk grandma, and those kind of images of aging I don't like. But you see it on LinkedIn, you see it on Facebook, you see much. There's a wonderful book coming out called Joy Span by a gerontologist, and her mother is 96. And I think it's called The Gerontologist on Instagram, if anybody looks. And Betty is 96, and she is beautiful and articulate and wonderful. And these are people that we can all look at. You and I can look at and say, I want to be like that in 16, 18 years. I want to still be around, and I want to be like that. And there were no images like that before. If you think of the Golden Girls, right? Everybody uses the Golden Girls. Well, first of all, the Golden Girls themselves were only in their 50s. And Estelle Getty, who played the mother and always walked around with her pocketbook, she was in her 60s when she played that role. So, everybody uses that as, oh, that's aging. Well, it's not aging. That's why I say to my friends, some of my friends will say to me, well, I can't be you. I don't want to tell my age. And I say, but you look great and you live great for your age. And younger people need to see that. And to me, that's the biggest hope, is that the images are changing. Movies are coming out. I don't know if you saw the movie Thelma last year with June Squibb, who is 94, and she plays a grandmother who's scammed, and she fights back. And it's a wonderful, funny movie. Rent it. It's just a great movie. And I hear she's in a new movie. So people are making movies with 96-year-olds, not to make fun of them, not to put them just in a nursing home, but to show them doing active things. And to me, those are the things that are going to change the minds and hearts of people about aging, the actual role models. And that's why for me, when I was involved with my old ladies, I always said, I'm going to write a book someday. And I never knew how I was going to write it. But I always knew that I had stumbled on something very important, which was dare to look at someone older and learn from somebody older instead of averting your eyes.
I don't want this conversation to end. I really don't. You've said the most amazing things today to inspire people that are getting older, that this isn't the end of the line. They can go on to, like your old ladies. One of my icons and role models is Iris Apfel, who died last year at 102. And she, up to that point, she was still a spokesperson for eyeglasses, rugs, and everything else. So what is one piece of advice or words of wisdom from the wisdom whisperer that you can offer our audience?
Well, I think the most important thing is to connect and to have people around you. The worst thing, the stereotype of aging is loneliness. And it is a bad thing. It can kill you. Loneliness can kill you. And if it doesn't kill you, it can break your spirit. So in whatever way you can reach out, whether it's meeting new people by taking classes, taking up a new hobby, getting a dog. One of my young old ladies, she's only 86, but when you get to be 81, you can't always find a 20-year age difference. But she got a puppy at 86. And I was so proud of her for doing that, because two things that a dog does. It gives you something to take care of, gets you out of yourself. You have someone else, a creature that you're responsible for. But it also gets you out of the house. And that's a really, really important thing. And so when my friend Patricia got this dog, and got a puppy, no less, I don't think I'd get another puppy, but she got this puppy, and she did such a smart thing. She found a 60-something who is kind of co-parenting and takes the dog off her hands every now and then. The 60-year-old loves the dog too. And Patricia knows, she doesn't know if she's going to live till 90 or 96 or 100. She's 86 now. She knows the dog won't be without a parent. And that's what stops a lot of people from getting a dog. Because I know when I'm in Florida and I see a lot of old people and they go, oh, I miss my dog. I loved my little princess. And I'd say, why don't you get another dog? It's so good for you. Oh, what's going to happen if I die? So Patricia took care of that. She answered that question. And I think that is the most important thing, to stay connected and also stay in the game, however it works for you. It's not somebody else's definition of what the game is. It's not the job you once had. It's the things that feed your soul. And Marge used to say she traded stocks until she died at 104 and a quarter. And she'd say to me, it gets me out of bed in the morning. So it's that thing of what gets you out of bed in the morning. And it could be for some people taking care of their house. Gives them great pride. Nothing wrong with that. And I will tell you myself, and maybe you're experiencing this too, I find satisfaction now in things that I once took for granted. That I still can cook and cook a really good meal. And that makes me really happy. I can feed myself. That's very symbolically and in practical terms, very important to feed yourself. So you take pleasure in little things too. That's something else I learned from my old ladies. So I gave you more than one answer.
Oh, that's all right. Melinda Blau, this has been so inspiring. And if anyone wants to get more of a glimpse into the old ladies, please pick up The Wisdom Whisperer. Whisperers by Melinda Blau, and read it. It's a joyful book. And I can't thank you enough. We've been trying to do this for so long, but no more time got by us. We finally did it. We did it. Melinda, such a pleasure. Such a pleasure, such words of wisdom that I hope everybody, no matter what age you are listening to this, can take something away that you can bring into your life to give it purpose and joy and fulfillment. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. We are all getting older, even you Gen Xers. So here's an important takeaway. Getting older is a gift. How do you feel about aging, and are you enjoying the fruits of your age? If you loved what you heard, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star rating and review. Also, please visit my website, trycoaching.com. Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, Zepbound, and all the other similar meds. What do all of these have in common? They are the many injectables for weight loss. And there are so many questions and concerns about these products today. Dr. Lael Forbes, my next guest, is a surgeon who specializes in bariatric surgery and has been a trailblazer and specialist in the use of GLP-1 and GIP for the past 15 years, which are the medications for medical weight loss. You won't want to miss this episode as we dive into the world of managing your weight and the level of obesity in this country.